3 months had passed since Julia started working at the company, and in that time, she had proven herself to be one of the most exceptional employees. Her first major project had been a turning point. Tasked with restructuring one of the company's struggling departments, she had proposed a strategy that minimized losses and maximized efficiency. Her analysis was precise, her approach innovative. But what had truly caught Minjun's attention was how eerily similar her methods were to his own. She had broken down the company's financial structure in a way that mirrored the way he used to do it. Her solutions, the way she anticipated challenges, even the way she presented her ideas. It was as if she knew his mind better than anyone. At first, it had unsettled him. He had even considered the possibility that she had been spying on him. But after watching her closely over the months, he realized something strange. Julia wasn't mimicking him. She was simply thinking like him. And that was what disturbed him the most. The feeling of knowing her had only grown stronger. He found himself watching her during meetings, paying attention to the little things. How she took notes, how she analyzed problems, how she spoke with an air of confidence. There was something about her that felt connected to him. But no matter how hard he tried to recall, his mind remained blank. That evening, Minjun sat in Dr. Choi's office, his fingers tapping restlessly against the armrest of his chair. Dr. Choi studied him before speaking. "You're here because of her, aren't you?" Minjun exhaled sharply. "Julia. I can't get her out of my head. It's not romantic, it's something else. Every time I see her, it feels like I should know her, but I don't." Dr. Choi leaned forward. "Have you been experiencing any memory triggers? Headaches?" Minjun shook his head. "No, but every time she presents a project, it feels like she's reading my thoughts. She knows things about my strategies that I've never shared with anyone." Dr. Choi considered this. The brain is complex. Sometimes, memories resurface in unexpected ways. Maybe she reminds you of something, someone, from your past. Minjun frowned. "But I can't remember anything." Dr. Choi nodded. "Then don't force it. If she is truly connected to your past, the memories will come naturally." Minjun left the office feeling no closer to an answer. But one thing was certain. Julia wasn't just another employee. She was someone he needed to figure out. A few days later, Julia stood at the company lobby, casually chatting with the receptionist about an upcoming office event when the atmosphere suddenly shifted. A woman walked in, her presence impossible to ignore. Dressed in an elegant designer outfit, her heels clicking against the marble floor, she exuded confidence. The receptionist's expression tensed slightly as she murmured, "That's Baek Ji-yoon." Julia turned her head slightly. "And she is?" Sua, who had just walked by, overheard the question and leaned in. "Minjun's fiancé." Julia's fingers stilled against the counter. "Oh!" She had known Minjun would have moved on, but hearing it still sent an unexpected pang through her. Still, she quickly brushed it off. It didn't matter. Sua continued in a hushed tone. "She comes from a powerful family. Their engagement is a big deal." Julia gave a small nod, pretending the information didn't faze her. "I see." But just as she turned to leave, she felt a sharp, lingering gaze on her. Slowly, she met Baek Ji-yoon's scrutinizing stare. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, recognition flickered in Ji-yoon's eyes, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She remembered Julia, and she was clearly not pleased to see her. Julia held her gaze calmly before walking away, uninterested in whatever tension Ji-yoon was trying to create. But even as she made her way back to her office, she could still feel the weight of Ji-yoon's glare on her back. Ji-yoon slid into the backseat of her car after meeting Minjun. She slammed the door shut with anger. Her nails tapped impatiently against her designer purse as she let out a scoff. "Julia, that woman had the audacity to show up here, in Minjun's company, acting like she belonged?" Ji-yoon's lips curled in disgust. How pathetic. Did Julia think she could just waltz back into Minjun's life, as if she was important? As if she mattered? She let out a sharp breath, irritation simmering beneath her perfectly composed exterior. Minjun hadn't recognized her. That alone was proof that Julia was nothing but a forgotten speck in his past. And that's exactly where she needed to stay. Ji-yoon's grip tightened around her purse. Julia looked different, but she still had that same irritating presence, calm, composed, and acting like she was something special. It made Ji-yoon's blood boil. She had spent years by Minjun's side, making sure he focused on the right future, the one that was best for him. And now this woman, this nobody, thought she could just appear and disrupt everything? Pathetic. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Miss Beck, should I? Just drive, Jean snapped. She needed to figure out what Julia wanted. Because if that woman thought she could worm her way back into Minjun's life, she was in for a rude awakening. Jean smirked, her perfectly lined lips curving into something cruel. Minjun was hers. He always had been. And she wasn't about to let some washed-up nobody ruin that. A week later, Julia's world momentarily shifted when Nathan fell ill. His fever was high, and his breathing was uneven. Without hesitation, she rushed him to the hospital, her heart pounding with fear. At the hospital, a nurse led them to a private room, and not long after, the doctor walked in. "Good evening, I'm Dr. Daniel Lee," he introduced himself. Julia barely paid attention, too focused on Nathan. "Please help him." Dr. Lee nodded and quickly examined Nathan, his movements efficient and professional. He checked his breathing, took his temperature, and asked the nurse to prepare in 4. "He's burning up," Julia said anxiously. Dr. Lee remained calm. "It's a viral infection. His fever is high, but with the right medication and fluids, he'll recover soon." Julia exhaled shakily as she sat beside Nathan, brushing his damp hair back. "Thank you." Dr. Lee gave a reassuring nod. "We'll monitor him overnight. Try to get some rest." Julia glanced at Nathan's peaceful face, exhaustion washing over her. Right now, nothing else mattered. Julia sat in the hospital waiting area, her fingers lightly stroking Nathan's small hand as he slept against her shoulder. His fever had come down slightly, but the worry in her chest remained. The doctor, Daniel, had been professional, quick, and efficient in treating Nathan. He had examined him carefully, prescribed the necessary medication, and assured her it was just a viral infection. "You should let him rest for the next few days," Daniel said, handing her a prescription. "Make sure he stays hydrated, and if his fever doesn't break by tomorrow, bring him back." Julia nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Daniel." He gave her a small smile. "Just doing my job." Then, his gaze softened slightly. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Julia only nodded, adjusting Nathan in her arms before leaving the consultation room. By the time she arrived at the apartment, she was drained. Stepping inside, she found Jaiwu sitting on the couch, sipping a cup of tea. Jaiwu immediately noticed the exhaustion on her face. "What happened?" Julia let out a slow breath. "Nathan had a fever. I had to take him to the hospital." Jaiwu's eyes widened in concern. "Is he okay?" "He'll be fine," Julia reassured her. "The doctor said it's just a viral infection." Jaiwu sighed in relief. "Good. You should get some rest too." Julia hesitated before speaking again. "By the way, I saw Minjun's fiancée last week." Jaiwu sat up straighter. "Minjun has a fiancé." Julia nodded. "She came to the company." "What did she do?" "She glared at me," Julia said. "I only found out who she was when Sua mentioned it." Jaiwu frowned. "And you don't think it's strange?" Julia shook her head. "I don't care about her, Jaiwu. Whoever Minjun is with now, it's none of my business now." Jaiwu studied her for a moment before nodding. "If that's how you feel, then I won't push." Julia offered a small smile. 3 days later, Julia sat at her desk, reviewing the final details of the project that had secured LK Group's biggest deal yet. The weight of the past 3 months lingered on her shoulders. Long hours, countless revisions, and relentless pressure. But in the end, it had all paid off. The entire team had been buzzing with excitement since the contract was signed. And now, CEO Kong Minjun was hosting a celebration dinner in honor of the success. She leaned back, stretching her fingers as she exhaled. Just then, Sua, one of her colleagues, strolled over with a smirk. "You should be proud of yourself," Sua said, crossing her arms. "This deal wouldn't have happened without you." Julia offered a small smile. "It was a team effort." Sua rolled her eyes. "Maybe, but we both know who carried this project." Even CEO Kong was impressed. At the mention of Minjun, Julia's grip on her pen tightened slightly. He had been paying more attention to her lately. Though his praise was subtle, his curiosity was impossible to ignore. His sharp gaze lingered on her, as if trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know existed. "Are you excited for the dinner?" Sua teased. "I hear it's going to be extravagant." CEO Kong doesn't do things halfway. "It's just another work event," Julia murmured. "Liar." Sua grinned. "You worked your butt off for this. At least enjoy the recognition." Julia hummed in response, but said nothing more. Enjoying the moment wasn't an option. She had more important things to focus on, Nathan. Meanwhile, in Minjun's office, Minjun stood by his office window, restless. Julia. She executed his strategies, methods he had never shared. How? If she's connected to you, the memories will come on their own. Dr. Choi's words haunted him. And the memories were coming, fleeting, fragmented moments that vanished before he could grasp them. A knock pulled him from his thoughts. His assistant, Sungo, entered. CEO Kong, the dinner arrangements are finalized. Good. Sungo hesitated. You seem preoccupied. Minjun exhaled. It's nothing. But deep down, he knew this dinner might bring answers he wasn't ready for. The celebration dinner was in full swing. The restaurant was elegantly decorated, the sound of clinking glasses and low conversations filling the air. Julia sat at a table with her colleagues, listening as they discussed the success of the project. She had barely touched her drink when Minjun's voice echoed through the microphone. To everyone who worked tirelessly on this project, this is for you. Your efforts have placed our company on a new level, Minjun said, his expression composed. The crowd applauded, and then someone called out, CEO Kong, shouldn't we have a game to make this night more fun? Minjun smirked. A game, huh? Any suggestions? One of the executives suggested a memory-based challenge. Each team had to recall past projects and their strategies to solve a mock business problem. Julia stiffened slightly. This game, she had done it before. With Minjun. Back then, they had worked late nights, bouncing ideas off each other, creating strategies that led to successful deals. It had been their thing. Minjun, unaware, agreed to the game. As the challenge progressed, he found himself unconsciously syncing with Julia's answers, finishing her thoughts, predicting her responses. It was effortless. Natural. And then something hit him. A flash. Late nights in an office. Papers spread out. A woman laughing beside him. Her voice blending with his as they crafted business models together. A strategy they had built together. His head spun. Another flash. A name. Julia. His vision blurred. The room tilted. And before he could grasp the memory, darkness consumed him. Gasps filled the restaurant as Minjun collapsed. Julia stood frozen as chaos erupted around her. Employees rushed to him, someone calling for an ambulance. The moment she snapped out of it, she found herself stepping forward, but she stopped. This wasn't her place. Minutes later, paramedics arrived, lifting Minjun onto a stretcher. Julia watched as they carried him away, her heart oddly heavy. She turned and found Sua looking at her. He'll be fine, Sua said, though there was a strange edge to her voice. Julia nodded, pushing down the emotions she had no right to feel. Elsewhere, Baek Ji-yoon entered an upscale cafe, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she approached a private booth where Minjun's brother, Kong Jae-hyuk, sat waiting. She slid into the seat opposite him, crossing her arms. How did she end up in Minjun's company? She demanded without preamble. Jae-hyuk barely glanced up from his coffee. Who? Ji-yoon scoffed. Don't play dumb. Julia. That woman shouldn't even be in this country, let alone working under Minjun. Jae-hyuk finally met her gaze, his expression unreadable. I don't know how she got here, but it doesn't matter. Ji-yoon's nails dug into her palm. It matters. We did everything to get rid of Minjun from her. Your parents wanted her gone the moment they heard Minjun married her. And now, after all these years, she shows up here. Jae-hyuk sighed, leaning back. Calm down, Ji-yoon. You're acting paranoid. She let out a bitter laugh. Paranoid? We nearly lost Minjun because of that accident. All because he refused to let go of her. Now she's back, and I won't let her ruin things again. Jae-hyuk's expression darkened. Do whatever you want with Julia, I don't care. But leave Minjun out of it. The last time you interfered, he almost died. I won't let that happen again. Ji-yoon clenched her jaw, her pride stung. You think she's not a threat to him? If he remembers everything. He won't. Jae-hyuk's voice was cold. And even if he does, it's too late. You're already engaged. He doesn't remember her, and as far as we know, he never will. Ji-yoon smirked. Good. Because I won't allow her to come near him again. Minjun woke to the blinding white of the hospital ceiling, the rhythmic beep of machines filling the silence. His head throbbed, and a strange heaviness pressed against his chest. Dr. Choi stood at the foot of his bed, checking his chart. You're awake, he said, relieved. Minjun tried to sit up, but the dizziness forced him back against the pillow. What happened? You collapsed at the event, Dr. Choi said. Overexertion. But also, you were forcing yourself to remember something, weren't you? Minjun stiffened. Flashes of the scene from the party played in his mind. A moment, a feeling, a memory just beyond his grasp. It was something he had done before. But with who? Julia. His hands clenched the blanket. Every time I see her, I feel like I know her, he admitted. And tonight, that feeling was overwhelming. Dr. Choi exhaled. Memories don't return under pressure. The more you force it, the worse it will be. Minjun ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I need to know who she is to me. Dr. Choi's gaze was unreadable. Then let it come naturally. If she was part of your past, your mind will find its way back to her. Minjun closed his eyes. He wasn't sure if that was a relief or a warning. Minjun sat on the hospital bed, his fingers pressing against his temples as he tried to make sense of everything. The flashes of memory were faint, like whispers in the wind, just out of reach but persistent. Dr. Choi had just left after their conversation, and Minjun exhaled sharply. Julia. Why did her name feel so heavy on his chest? Outside, Dr. Choi made his call. He's starting to remember. There was silence, then a slow exhale. Finally, Dr. Choi glanced toward the room where Minjun sat, deep in thought. He spoke to me about her today. It's only a matter of time before it all comes back. Minjun's brother chuckled, though there was a hint of sadness in his tone. You don't know how long I've waited for this. He always remembered me, even after our parents cut me off. Every time he called from Ghana, he couldn't stop talking about Julia, about their future together. His voice lowered. And then they took it all away from him. Dr. Choi's voice was careful. You know what this means, don't you? I do, Minjun's brother said firmly. And I don't regret anything. I kept our parents from knowing about Nathan. I made sure Julia was safe. But Minjun deserves to know the truth. Dr. Choi sighed. Daniel agrees. At that, Minjun's brother gave a knowing laugh. Of course Daniel does. He's been playing his part in this longer than you have. He made sure Julia got into LK group for a reason. To push Minjun's memory, Dr. Choi murmured. And it's working, Minjun's brother said. Now we wait. Inside the hospital, Daniel Lee leaned against the wall, watching through the small window into Minjun's room. His old friend was awake, his expression clouded with confusion. Minjun didn't recognize him anymore, but that didn't matter. He would. The day Julia brought Nathan into the hospital, Daniel knew immediately. The boy was Minjun's son. It was undeniable. He had made sure Julia got the job at LK Group. He had positioned everything so Minjun would remember. Because unlike the others, he wouldn't let Minjun's past be erased forever. 2 days later, Minjun sat on the edge of his bed in his penthouse, his hands gripping his phone tightly. His chest felt heavy, his mind clouded with confusion. The dreams had started after the night of the dinner event, growing more vivid with each passing day. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Julia. She was always there, smiling, laughing, reaching for him. The warmth of her touch felt real, almost as if he had lived those moments before. But when he tried to recall them, everything blurred like a painting smeared by careless hands. Minjun let out a slow breath. Why did she feel so familiar? And why did it hurt when he thought about her? He glanced at the clock. 2:43 a.m. There was no point in trying to sleep. He needed answers. Without hesitation, he called his assistant, Sungo. After a few rings, a groggy voice answered. Sir, I need you to investigate someone, Minjun said, his voice steady despite the storm in his mind. Her name is Julia. She works in our company. There was a pause. Julia? The new employee. Yes. Sungo sounded confused but didn't question it. Understood. What exactly do you want me to find out? Everything. Minjun leaned forward, rubbing his temple. I also want you to look into something else. What happened 6 years ago? Sir? Minjun exhaled. I know I was in Ghana, but I don't remember how I got back to South Korea. I want you to find out everything about that time. Every detail. Another pause, then Sungo's voice turned serious. I'll start immediately. Minjun ended the call and leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. At that same time, Jian sat in her penthouse, a glass of wine in hand, her manicured nails tapping against the rim. Minjun had been acting differently ever since that dinner event. He was distracted. Jian swirled the wine in her glass, her nails clicking against the surface. She had been patient for too long. He was supposed to have forgotten everything about that woman, but it seems he is remembering, and that should not happen. Setting her glass down, she grabbed her phone and dialed a number. The line rang twice before a deep voice answered. Miss Beck, I have a job for you, Jian said coldly. Find out how Julia came to South Korea and, more importantly, how she ended up working at LK Group. There was a pause. Julia? Yes. Jian clenched her jaw. That woman should have never appeared in Minjun's life again. The man on the other end hummed. You think someone placed her there? Ji-yoon scoffed. She's not capable of getting into LK group on her own. Someone helped her, and I want to know who. I'll look into it. Good, she said sharply. And keep it quiet. No one can know. Ending the call, Ji-yoon leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had spent years making sure Minjun never questioned his past, and she wasn't going to let Julia ruin that. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe and leave a comment. See you in part 4.